Keating, and I'm the broker owner at REMAX Jefferson City, one of the offices participating today. And it's my pleasure at this time to introduce you to your host, which is Elizabeth Mendenhall, broker owner of REMAX Boone Realty. So, Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Okay, so we have four offices here today. We have Century 21 Hansen, which is in Fort Lauderdale. Well, Century 21 Hansen, which is in Fort Lauderdale. We've got Kopf and Haas with Realtors, which are in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have REMAX Jefferson City in Jefferson City, and we have REMAX Boone Realty in Columbia, Missouri. So we have a great group here. We are so thankful that all of you have made this a commitment to be here this morning. And I want Pete to say hi. Pete's going to be talking this morning. He's one of the brokers in Cincinnati. So welcome, Pete.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be here and great to see all these great realtors.
And we've got Christine Hansen, who is down in Fort Lauderdale.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to all virtually be together. Excited to kind of share some good things with you. So thank you.
So they are literally two of some of my favorite people on the planet, along with Larry, and then also Steve Casper, who is from Cincinnati, and he's going to wrap us up at the end. So really important changes. That's why you're here today in the Code of Ethics. And these came about as a result of a recent board of directors meeting with the National Association of Realtors. And we know in all of our offices, we share a strong commitment to ethics and a strong commitment to the code, and we needed to update it with you. So as we start today, though, I want you to think of this a little bit more as a drinking game, okay? There are obviously, we are not just leaders in the association, but most importantly, we are brokers. We are your partners in this business. And part of this is making sure that we are focused on your business. So I know that when I talk to agents, one of the things we talk about is listing presentations. And what is it that the sellers always want to hear? They want to get their house sold. Like, how do they get their house sold? So part of today is not necessarily in regards to, okay, great, we have this big code of ethics change, here's more regulations. It's how do we focus and make sure that you can generate more leads and convert more leads and focus on your business. And that's part of why we are having this meeting here. And obviously this year's been crazy, lots of things going on, different dynamics. And Christine Hansen will talk a lot about PAC. People are crazy. And we know that everything's going on in the world. And because of that, unfortunately, some realtors have gone a little bit crazy. If there's a show called Girls Gone Wild, maybe this year we could have had Realtors Gone Wild a little bit. And we want to show and share with you some of the things that led up to the Code of Ethics decision. So here is one example. Watch this video.
One of Denver's best-known realtors has been fired by REMAX after nearly 50 years with that company. REMAX says Denise Rich was removing Black Lives Matter signs from an affluent neighborhood where she sells homes. Rich has been a prominent real estate agent in Denver. She's been with REMAX since 1973, specializing in luxury homes. People in the Hilltop area posted in Nextdoor about Rich taking Black Lives Matter yard signs. REMAX Alliance owner Chad Oxner told me today that the decision to terminate Rich was simple. He told me, quote, "We're not a company that can condone trespassing on people's private property and theft." I asked Rich by phone about the removal of the Black Lives Matter signs and the end of her nearly half-century career with REMAX. She said, quote, "You distort the news. I can't talk to people who distort the news." Then she hung up.
So in this instance, not only did she take signs down, she was trespassing, right? She went on somebody's property, she destroyed property, and she trespassed. That's just not normally what kind of we want to do, right? And so, here you can see from her marketing, everything that she's done. She's got a great business. She's been in this a long while, and she went on somebody else's property, trespassed, took down signs, and that is just like not okay. And of course, now she's ended up on, the news. Now it's all over the place. Now she's lost her affiliation with her brokerage, and it's like, oh my gosh, she just completely and totally went crazy. And The thing about it is that whether it's, at 6 o'clock at night, whether it's during the day, you are always on the job. And you know that, I used to have an agent, and one of the things she talked about was when, it's like, what are your working hours? How often do you work? Someone said, well, I want to make sure I have a balanced work week and I do all that. And she said, well, what happens when you go out at 9 o'clock at night, you're sitting at the bar, and all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I'm interested in selling real estate. What are you going to say? I'm sorry, I'm not on the job right now. No, that's not kind of what you're going to say or what you're going to do. And so in that instance, we're always wearing our brand. You're always wearing your specific brand as an agent. Your name is your brand. You're wearing the company brand, and you're also wearing the Realtor brand. And in today's world, again, when you look at lead generation and you look at lead conversion and how do you generate leads, right? One of the things that we know is if you're turning someone off for any reason, you're not going to generate leads. And so where do you want to be in your business? How do you want to operate? Who do you want to attract? What are you going to do? Because we're living in this world that is this cancel culture. And we talk about it a lot with the cancel culture. And it's like, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm done. I don't like you. I'm deleting you from your phone. I'm deleting you from my universe. I'm unsubscribing from emails. I'm completely out of there. And so and again, talking about today, what can we do to make sure that you're not being canceled out of your client's world or canceled out of anyone's world when you're trying to build your business and do different leads and do different conversions? So one of the things we know is, why do people unfriend other people? Well, the first is that we're sending unimportant information, right? You're just bombarded with unimportant information. The second thing is that somebody deems it's inappropriate content. That's the second thing on the list, that they're going to inappropriate content, and inappropriate, is in the eyes of whoever is seeing it. Then we go to too many, kind of like the unimportant. But number 4 and number 5 on this list, if it's political information or if it's religious information, these are those top reasons of why somebody's booting you out of their list and you're not going to be in their train. And if you kind of think of that movie, The Minority Report, long time ago, movie with Tom Cruise, he was walking down a hallway and all these ads started popping up on either side of him. And they were the ads that they knew they wanted. If you haven't seen the movie Social Dilemma on Netflix, go check it out, because you are getting content of things that people want. And if you are in one of these top 5 areas, you're going to be excluded from them. And so that's unfortunately a piece of this. So, so one of the things we're talking about today is, what can we do to make sure you're not canceled out? And the other thing is that we're going to talk about today some things that are very specific to real estate. The fact that you have a real estate license, and the fact that you have subscribed to the code of and all of the laws and things that go along with what it means to be a realtor. And you're going to be, maybe it was Thanksgiving, maybe this year we're not surrounded by our friends and family like they were, but we definitely are influenced. We have conversations with our friends and family in our lives. They're sharing things like, here's what I think about politics, and here's what I think about politics. The one thing I know is they don't understand our world. They don't understand, and they don't know some of the provisions of which we hold ourselves to a higher standard, higher than that real estate agent. So that code of ethics for our profession doesn't exist in other industries. It does not exist in Chick-fil-A. It does not exist at CNN. It does not exist at Starbucks or Hobby Lobby. So, when we agreed to take on this profession, take on this license, part of the freedom, the opportunity, the ability to help people, our management of time, unlimited income potentials came with some higher responsibilities. And one of those was subscribing to the Fair Housing Act. And I can tell you right now, my family, well, that's bad, because many of you know my family is in real estate, but some of my family is, they don't always understand the Fair Housing Act. And the fact that we have this additional provision that we agreed to subscribe and to make sure that no one in the 7 protected classes would ever be denied the right to home ownership, and would ever feel like we were someone who was contributing and not helping them with that home ownership dream. And that act was passed in 1968. In addition to that, we have Article 10 of the Code of Ethics. And so while we have the 7 protected classes, the code is adding a higher standard. So we cannot discriminate on basis of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, the familial status, national origin, the sexual orientation, or the gender identity. And the sexual orientation and gender identity were added into the code. So that goes above and beyond the Federal Fair Housing Act. And this is something we are super proud of, right? We are proud to know that that is a piece of what makes our whole, universe go around. And we're proud to know that if somebody can afford it and they are qualified, that they are going to be able to purchase a home. So as you saw earlier in the video, some things have happened this year that have said, okay, realtors, do you uphold this ideal? Is this truly something that you believe in? And what does it take to hold us higher than just the standard of an ordinary licensee? And that is where we saw, in addition to the standards of practice 10.5, which was passed here recently, and this change in the Code of Ethics and why we're here today. And what has been added is that realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs against members of those protected classes. And this is now a higher standard. And it's not just in the real estate transaction, it's overall. And so it's saying, you know what, if you use hate speech, it could be construed as discriminatory or between those protected classes, which could then have a disparate impact on them purchasing a home because you're wearing that realtor brand all along. And so as you can imagine, some of you are maybe reading this for the first time. Some of you are hearing this, maybe you've heard it before, and this is what's kind of going on. And so lots of questions have come up to it. We want today to take a little chance to go through what hate speech looks like, what it doesn't look like. Christine's going to go through the process then of how this is processed through the Code of Ethics, because a lot of questions came up on the process. We're going to share with you some Pete and Christine are going to share frequently asked questions. And then we are going to, of course, open it up and let you answer any questions that you might have. So what is hate speech? That consistently came up. This was actually kind of floated out in the real estate universe a month, even more than a month, way before the board of directors. So there was lots of time for comments, lots of times for questions, and lots of people sorting through it. And as you might imagine, things that got sorted through were different localities in the country were kind of processing it differently. There were a lot of different questions based on where you are. And so, what is hate speech? Derogatory words and phrases, yes, that's hate speech. Jokes off color, yes. Sharing things on social media could be considered hate speech if you're sharing something that's considered hate speech. And then the intent. And that's really one of the biggest issues, is the intent. And that's probably where we got a lot of questions about, was really, of course, of like, okay, what if I accidentally did something? What is the intent? Are you using the words to weaponize against the protected classes? No's. Questions that came up. What is not hate speech? Is doing a load of whites, saying you're doing a load of whites in your laundry, is that hate speech? No, that's not. Can you say I love Jesus? Yes. If you say yes, ma'am, to somebody who maybe is sensitive about their pronouns and maybe you got the pronoun wrong, is that hate speech? No. If you like to post, is that hate speech? No. And in fact, one of the questions that came up, sometimes you're running through your social media, you're clicking like, you're not even thinking about it, would that be considered hate speech? No. And then the other thing that is not going to be considered hate speech are things that you do in private. Your thoughts and your beliefs are yours. Those things exist. But what is when you are, when you walk into that bar and you have on this shirt, is it likely that someone of one of the protected classes is going to look at that and say, hey, this isn't somebody who's going to be friendly to me and I'm in a protected class. And oh, by the way, I know that they are a realtor. So, is that going to be, could that be considered hate speech? Could that be considered intentional? Yes, it could. And so it rolls around to this topic of this disparate impact. And this is where, the treatment or to discriminatory parties or practices could be considered discrimination. And this is a word, it's used in courts. We talk about it a lot. It's the unintentional discrimination that may happen, but we are also way more sensitive and way aware of it. Again, I mentioned my uncle was like, what on earth? This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And some of you may be thinking that too. And I'm like, but you don't understand our fair housing obligations, and you don't understand our Code of Ethics obligations, which are higher. And so, if there, and again, it's that impact and intent that's going to be really important as we kind of go through this. And of course, I said, there's going to be a lot of questions. Part of this today, I'm going to tell you, part of this today is trust and belief. And those are words that are, they're very touchy these days. You know, when you don't have trust and belief, that's when you start to have breakdowns in the system. When you don't trust the MLS and you don't trust the fact that, yes, we've agreed to cooperate, we start to have breakdowns and disruption. When you don't trust the government, right, we start to have breakdowns. We get to make a choice of whether or not we are going to trust the professional standards process, and we are going to trust those realtors who are in the process. And then we have to trust in the fact that if something goes wrong, that we have the opportunity to correct it. And that's it's one of the best things about this profession in this industry. And Pete and Christine can speak to this as leaders, is that, you know, one of the best things is we are always looking at it, and we're trying to look at it from different angles. And it's also one of the hardest things because everybody's trying to look at it from different angles. And the professional standards process has been around now for over 100 years. It's one of the most sophisticated in the country. And so, you know, it's very critical, and it has been upheld, and it constantly has checks and balances by our peers, which is a great thing because it allows us to manage that process and not have someone else manage it for us. So I'm going to show you another video. One of the questions that I got asked is, why is NAR doing this? And I said, you know what, in this particular instance, I can tell you that this was absolutely a groundswell movement coming up from local associations, coming up from brokers who asked NAR, and then when I say NAR, the leadership team, to put together a work group of more than 50 people and to outsource this and try to crowdsource this conversation, because things were happening and things were getting reported, like this next video. And I will warn you, this is a little harsh.
Sold NYC.
Take a good picture.
Okay.
Fucking cunt.
Yep.
Take a good picture.
What's your name?
And I'm going all over
What's your
taking
name?
all yours.
Okay. All right. I'm calling the police right now.
Watch me, cunt.
Okay.
Watch me.
Okay.
Watch me.
Okay.
For you and everyone in your
Okay.
family.
All right.
Fuck you. Yes.
Keep
you
on
should,
going.
You should know who I am.
Who are you?
You should know who
Who
I am.
are you?
You'll find out.
Who are you?
Don't worry. Follow me to the other
Okay, I
places.
will.
Follow me to the
I
other.
will. I will.
All signs going down.
I will.
All signs
Okay.
going down.
All right. Keep on going.
Let me sound something for you.
Incredible people of Michigan, we have made America powerful again. We have made America.
You should know my name.
I don't know who you are. Who are you?
Don't worry.
Who are you?
Just follow me. All the signs
Okay.
are
I
coming
will.
down.
Actually, it's right here.
Now, as you can see, as it gets reported in the news, and someone's typing in, remember when this went viral, you know, it gets reported he's a real estate broker. When it hits the other news media, what does it get reported? That he is a realtor, you know? And so again, that brand, that badge, that goes with him all along, and they tracked him down, and he was a realtor. And so, you know, that's not who we are. That's not who we want to be. And that's not who we are in the companies that are watching here today. And the code of ethics exists for the education of many and the punishment of very few. And none of us on today expect any of this to happen in any of our offices. But when it does happen in the industry, it absolutely reflects on all of us. And one of the things with this is, you know, there was no process for that broker then to say to the next broker, here's what happened. The real estate commission isn't going to intervene. And I should make note, you know, again, the code of ethics is in regards to the protected classes in the code. It's not in regards to the Democrats or the Republicans. You know, it's not in regards to hate speech against attorneys, which some of us have a lot of those conversations or want to have a lot of those sometimes, with no disrespect to the attorneys, if there's attorneys on the call. And so I'm going to I'm going to kind of turn it over to Christine, and she's going to go through a little bit of the process and what the process looks like here. So Christine, I'm pulling this up for you, and just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
All right, thank you so much. And that's great information in the beginning, Elizabeth, just to be able to really start having, you know, you've answered really the why. Why is this necessary? And even just seeing that video, you know, all of us would be ashamed to have to be recognized as someone like that. So I really appreciate, you know, the start of all of this to be able to give our members the pride of being able to be a realtor and being able to up, you know, that recognition. So now a lot of concern was had with, well, what kind of process do we have? And so this is just kind of going to be, there's a 5 steps of the process that we're going to walk you through. And it's very similar if you're familiar with when you have a grievance and you want to file a grievance against another realtor or even an arbitration. So next slide, Elizabeth. This is really showing that we have checks and balances, and this is really showing that we're going to protect. We're going to have a process to protect. And so this is really going to be how we define these 5 steps. Next slide. So as you can see, there's definitely a clearly defined path that realtors know in advance. Training is going on as we speak at all of the associations with regards to this so that it can be handled in the same way. And Elizabeth mentioned the trust. You know, for years and years and years, we've had the Code of Ethics and we've had this type of process when you're filing a grievance with another realtor. And so this is going to look, for those of you that are familiar with that process or have sat on professional standards or grievance committees, this will look very familiar to you. So let's go to the first one, Elizabeth. So with the first one, we're going to talk about, this is if somebody, like Elizabeth mentioned, if you see someone who has done something that is now what you believe a violation of the code. And so someone's going to witness, either overhear you talking to someone that is against now these protected classes, not only at the law, but what we now have as a realtor. And this is something that they're going to believe violates the code. So the very first thing is someone sees it or they experience the conduct they believe is in violation. So then what that person does would be file an ethics complaint with the local association. So again, just like we mentioned about the ethics complaint, this is the same exact thing. It's an ethics complaint. It gets filed with the local association and a description of that conduct is had. Then the third step is that complaint is reviewed by the grievance committee. And the grievance committee has 8 criteria in which they try to deem whether they should forward the complaint or whether it's something that does not violate it. So again, like if it's something where someone complains because someone said something about a politician or someone said something about, you know, something that's not in the protected classes, the grievance committee would look at this, might not like the behavior so much, but there would be no means and it would be dismissed. So that's kind of the way. And the other thing they look at is it filed in a timely manner? So that's the third step. The fourth step, Elizabeth? If the grievance committee ends up being able to say, yes, they feel there is a violation and they feel that there is further action that needs to be taken based on the information that they received and making sure that it hits all the criteria, they then would forward it to a hearing panel. The hearing panel is peers, people that have already been trained and gone through the process of knowing how to keep this process so that we do have those checks and balances, as I mentioned. The other thing is you have an opportunity, if something happens, you have an opportunity to be able to challenge the panel. So if something ever, you know, God forbid something happens and you're brought up on these kind of charges, they will send to you, here's the panel. If you all of a sudden see a competitor or a realtor that you had a terrible transaction with and you're like, oh, they would be out for me, you can actually challenge that and they would have to substitute that. So you get to kind of like approve the panel, meaning that you don't have anybody that you feel would be already prejudiced against you. So they would have the full process. They would go through everything. And what they would do is say, okay, is there, and this is on step number 5, is there a violation? And if they deem there is, then they would go into fines. Now, let's talk about what happens at the hearing panel. You can go ahead and bring in counsel. So the realtor that's being accused could bring in an attorney, could bring in counsel. They could bring in witnesses. So if it was a situation where they were joking or talking with someone and someone overheard it, they may bring that person in and be able to explain to the panel that this is just, jokes casually, it was misconstrued or it was heard wrong or whatever it is, so you can bring witnesses. You absolutely have testimony. So you're able to speak and defend yourself. And again, the hearing panel has to look at, does it match the criteria exactly? So even if it's behavior that they might not like, unless it's something that truly violates the code of ethics, they would have to dismiss the case. And then the other thing is the fact on what could happen as far as, let's say, the appropriate disciplinary action. It could be a fine, but it could also be having to go and sit through an ethics course. So there's a lot of different things with regards to that. Next slide, Elizabeth. This is so important. It is not NAR wanting to try to say, we're changing these things. You have all of these new things that you have to abide by, and we're going to throw everybody to the wolves. This is a very, very, very thought out, structured process. There's checks and balance at every mean, because if you think about it, not only is it checked with the grievance committee before it even goes anywhere, but then it goes to a panel who is very, very, very educated with regards to the exact rationale on whether there's a violation of the code or not. So I want you guys to kind of just be comfortable with that, so that you don't think, oh my gosh, I could accidentally say something, someone overhears me and I lose my license. Absolutely, that's not the intention. It's really to protect our brand, that we can stand up strong as realtors and know that we have a duty. I mean, forgetting all of this, I think every single one of you on the call would agree that as realtors, we have a duty to be kind. I mean, this is really, we were all talking about it, Pete and Elizabeth and I, saying, if we're kind, we don't even have to pay attention to this. So that's pretty much the process on that. And so we can move on to some Q&A. Any questions?
Well, and Christine, I would say one of the things, because of the questions that continue to come up, is that there were, a lot of it was the process, because again, most of us haven't gone through the professional standards process. And so the process has already been there in place. It's overseen by attorneys with lots of things. And that is consistent. And again, most of us don't know that, but if you want more information, there's a lot of more information. So you and Pete have, again, a lot of questions came up. You guys can share some of the ones that I think most people would ask, and then we'll open it up to the group for additional ones that maybe they won't address. So as they are prepared, as they're sharing the frequently asked questions, you have the option to use the chat to the side. The other thing that you can do is down at the bottom, you'll see reactions. On your kind of Zoom screen down at the bottom, you can kind of raise your thumb or make a little sign, and we'll try to call you out when Pete and Christine have gone through the FAQ. So Pete, start us off.
Okay, well, first of all, Elizabeth and Christine were the catalyst in putting this together, so thank you very much. We're super excited to be here. I'll start off with I'll lead into the most commonly asked question. And first of all, hate speech is not new. It isn't new. It's been around for a long time. I think it's heightened now due to technology, smartphones and social media. Secondly, I want to make sure everyone knows that, the National Association of Realtors is a volunteer membership. And the mission statement is important here. Our mission statement is to empower realtors as they preserve, protect, and advance the right to real property for all. And so Article 10 is a key article in our Code of Ethics. I mean, it is probably the key. It's about fair housing and anti-discrimination. So I think I'll lead with what's the most common question leading into this, and is NAR overreaching and getting out of our lane? And I think we could all agree that Article 10.5 fits within our preamble of our Code of Ethics, and I'll read that to you. Realtors identify and take steps through enforcement of this Code of Ethics and by assisting appropriate regulatory bodies to eliminate practices which may damage the public or which may discredit or bring dishonor to the real estate profession. So we're a voluntary membership. Our brand is professionalism and real estate professionals that hold themselves to a higher standard. I mean, in fact, isn't that why we're all here? Because we want to be part of a brokerage that holds itself to the highest standard. And when I look at the 3 brokerages here, that's why we associate ourselves with these brokerages. We want to be part of the best brokerage, the most professional brokerage in our market. And so I guess I would tell you that, are we out of our lane? No way. All we're doing is strengthening our professionalism and adhering to NAR's mission statement. So Christine, let's jump one to you. How about this one that I've gotten quite a few times? Would images posted before November 13th, 2020 be actionable?
Thank you, Pete, and that's a great question. So for all of you, these actions and the motion from the professional standards went to the National Association's Board of Realtors and was agreed upon and voted in. So November 13th is the date that we're starting. So that's kind of the reason for the question. And so if something, like you said, would any images prior? No. If there's things that were prior, the post itself, no, not at all. You don't have to worry about that. But if it is reposted or if it is shared to a new feed after the 13th, then it could be considered. So you need to be really careful about what you're reliking or reposting. And also if there's any new posts or comments on that, could be an actionable item. So you want to just make sure you're fine before that, but just be careful of anything going forward. Pete, in talking about the questions, another one that I've gotten, and I think that we're all sometimes just kind of afraid we don't really know what we don't know. And so what about referring to someone with the wrong pronoun or identifier? Would that be considered a violation of the code?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one, we've heard a ton. And I think the best way to do this, and what we've heard a lot, is use the 2-part test. Is the speech harassing? Is it hate speech, epithets, or slurs? And it must be based on the protected classes. So is the speech done with harassing an individual? Is it done, where you're weaponizing your language? And no, I mean, the answer is no. If you're not doing it intentionally to harm someone, then you do your 2-part test, and the answer is no. So it's a great question. Let's jump to one that I think a lot of people have questioned about, Christine, and that's about religion. And what about my church that teaches same-sex relations are a sin or wrong? That's a common question we've gotten.
So there's been a lot of conversation about that, about religion and faith and what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And this change is not attempting to change your beliefs or the way that you think. So there's no change with that. It's more about, are you weaponizing it against one of the protected classes? And that would be the only question. So absolutely no, Pete, not at all. Bringing this into this is something that NAR is handling. One of the big questions I got, and we saw that from the video with RE/MAX where they fired their agent. So Pete, why don't we just kind of leave it to the brokers to handle this?
Well, it's a great question. And I think, first of all, professional standards is the perfect place to put this. And I think one thing people ask is, why can't we leave it to the real estate commissions? And we can't, because that's a free speech issue. I think what we need to remember is that brokers may or may not record an issue with a realtor member that is an agent with them. And so without actionable sanctions, there's no record or alert to other brokers if this realtor would leave their current brokerage and go somewhere else. And so it's really important that we as a professional standards take this over and record these kind of actions to, protect our brand. And let's see, Christine, here's one. How does sharing your Christian or religious faith fall into this policy? I keep throwing these religious ones at you, and sorry, but I mean, these are legit questions that are asked over and over. I mean, I think our members really had some concerns, so it's good we handle these and explain them here on the call.
Absolutely. So, with regards to sharing your Christian or any type of religious faith, a statement supporting your religion is absolutely not harassing speech or hateful speech. Your statement must be one or the other or both in order to be discriminatory. So, absolutely not. If you're just professing your beliefs, that's not hate speech at all. So now I'm going to throw kind of one to you that I've heard a lot. And again, we're looking at this from what is protected classes with states and then kind of the upgrade of what NAR is doing, Pete. So we talk about gender identity and sexual orientation. They're not protected classes in 27 states. I mean, there's a huge chunk of the country where there's zero legal protection. So how does 10.5 protect the LGBTQ community?
So we did talk about these questions beforehand, and I actually want to read my answer because I think this one is super important to Realtors and what I'm super proud of. Here's my answer. The Code of Ethics is the only protection that these individuals have because there is no legal protection against discrimination based on your gender identity or sexual orientation in most parts of the country. So think about the dozens of states in the country where somebody can say bigoted, anti-LGBTQT statements, and there's zero legal protection from it. It's sickening. And so we have specifically designed our professional standards and our code of ethics to be a protection these folks have with our ability to sanction and fine members for these kinds of statements. I'm proud of that. I am super proud that we are standing up for all people, which is our mission statement. So that's a great question, Christine. And I mean, I think it's super important that we show our power and our protection and our love and our fight for all people. So let's jump over to, okay, this is one that I think, I'm surprised I hear this, and I'm hearing it from people that are very experienced, not only agents, but brokers throughout the country. Is 10.5 only directed at protected classes and not for everyone? Does this mean I can say hateful slurs or comments to whites? Christine?
So, this is such a common misperception, Pete, that the protected classes are all, a one-way street, and they're not. Everybody is a member of one or more protected class. The protected class isn't being a non-white. The protected class is race. I'm going to say that again. The protected class is race. And so if a realtor were to engage in hate speech based on somebody being white, they would be in violation and it would be actionable. So the protected classes themselves go both ways, and we have to remember that. So the next question, Pete, this is good conversations, and I really want to make sure that that each and every one of you are realizing that we've compiled things that we've heard over and over and over again. So I think this is kind of the last one that we've really put together. And so I'm going to throw this to you, Pete. What about a realtor showing support for a political party that might be deemed, racist or something like that? How does that fit into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, well, as we all know, 2020 politically was so volatile. I mean, everyone's heart was on their sleeve. I think people are very passionate. We got to go back to the two-part process on this. And that is it hateful speech? Is it based on the protected classes? The answer would be no. I mean, political affiliation happens. People are parts of all kinds of groups. And some people navigate and migrate one way and some the other. But being supportive of one political party is certainly not hateful speech, and it's not based on protected classes. Republicans and Democrats are not protected classes, Christine, as crazy as that sounds. So I think those are the frequently asked questions we've heard. I think Jamie's monitoring the chat, Elizabeth. Are there questions?
So I think we've got a question in the chat, and I think we have a hand up. So the first one kind of comes back to you, Pete, and that is you made the comment that it was in our lane. And the question is, so don't we already have articles that cover these issues? Why are we pushing for more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think like anything, we are evolving, and you know, as we talked about, hateful speech is more public now, especially with technology and with people videoing and taking pictures. And so when we say we're staying in our lane, we are staying in our lane. We are just protecting our brand with the evolution of technology. So hopefully that answers your question. Christine or Elizabeth, do you have a comment on that?
I think the other thing I could add to that is that, so when the preamble was written, it was written kind of as the aspirational piece of it. So when you read that, you actually can't file a code of ethics complaint on the preamble. You file it specifically on the standards of practices and articles. So there's one of the tests is whether or not the articles and the standards of practice then relate in the spirit of the preamble. So I think that was the question, how you can kind of think of it as it, while it's addressed in the preamble, now there's an article that supports it so that you can file on. And then I think we have a hand up, and I think it's either maybe Susan or Molly. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or maybe you were just giving a thumbs up.
It was just a thumbs up when they thanked you for the meeting.
Oh, thanks, Susan.
I think Steve Casper has a question.
No, actually not a question, but a follow-up to the previous question in terms of answer. Prior to 10.5, the hate speech had to be real estate related. 10.5 opens it up to any of our comments when it is specifically focused and targeted to one of the protected classes.
Thanks, Steve. And for you, those of you that don't know, Steve Casper is with Kopf Hunter Haas here in Cincinnati. Steve was part of the professional standards group that spent 6 months on this. And so he is our, I guess, our guru here on the call today, besides Elizabeth and Christine. So thanks, Steve.
Steve is our ultimate guru on this. And for those of you who are in Missouri, he does a lot of work with Bruce Ite. So you know Bruce, we all know Bruce. And Steve is one of his partners along with us. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have him. More questions or hands up that you may have on this? Can you submit open question? Yeah, can you submit an open question and a comment?
If you could just submit an open, like, is there a comment section or somewhere where you could describe situations and ask? I know that would also then give a legal record, but I can think of a dozen situations in the past, whether myself or someone else, because we don't know what other people's feelings are. So whether it's hate speech or not, in our eyes as realtors, it might be to someone else. And so if there was an open comments area that we could submit questions and then receive answers for some guidance, that would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So that's from Rhonda. And I think that in what you're saying is right, because even when we saw the discussion coming up to the board of directors, the questions are volatile. And then when they get asked kind of in a public forum, then all of a sudden everybody jumps on everybody. And it's like, what? I can't believe you're saying that. Or what about this? And then you almost start to see more hate at each other when people are just trying to figure it out. And so I do believe there is a place online where you can ask questions. You can always direct something to us and we can try to get it. We're trying to sort through it the same way you guys are. The other thing is that what we'll start to see on this is a lot of crowdsourcing. So we'll start to see different panels get asked different questions, and then we'll start to see those case studies come through, and that will, you know, and that's going to be really beneficial to the process as we move forward to it. You know, again, for us guys, we weren't expecting a lot of, you know, big questions with this group here today, because as Christine said, you just want to, you know, we want to be kind. It's the unknown. It's the fear, again, of being judged by your peers, that you worry someone might think something that you said, but the intent is going to be the real big one.
Yeah, I think that word weaponizing is a good word. You know, I heard Christine and Elizabeth use it a couple of times, and I've heard that a lot as we've talked through 10.5. And you know, think of it as a weapon. Is someone using that language to hurt someone like it's a weapon? And so if that's the case, then we've got an issue. I can't imagine someone on this call being worried about doing that. I think we hold ourselves to a higher standards, but we are leaders in our community, and people are going to come to us and ask these questions, certainly inside our industry. So number two, just real quick, I forgot to mention this earlier. There were a few of our agents from, I think, all three brokerages that couldn't get in today. We had a cap of 100. If someone reaches out to you because you were on the call, let them know that we are recording. Elizabeth's been gracious enough to record this, and we can share that with all of our agents.
Yeah, a Zoom fail for 2020. Put it on the list. But we'll have it recorded and we can watch it, make sure everybody gets it. Other questions or anything else you want to ask in regards to this? Hopefully we've kind of shared what we know.
And if you have a question, there's probably other people thinking the same questions. So
Yeah.
You don't need to be shy here. This is a safe place to really figure this all out. You know, I have one I'll ask because you guys are, our agents are, you know, Elizabeth, Pete, they're being a little, you know, chicken today, right? You know, so, okay, here's a question. What about jokes? We talked about it a little bit before, but what if you're with friends and you're, you know, just kind of saying it, how people sometimes do jokes that are maybe kind of now in this situation. What do you think would happen if somebody overheard you telling a joke and reported you? What do you see in that? And Steve, maybe you might be a good person, because I'm sure that you guys talked about that at in the Professional Standards Committee. Let's talk a little bit about that, where it's, I'm going to say it very cautiously, innocent fun when I talk about jokes.
There's no direct answer I can give you. It will depend on the situation specific. And ultimately, if someone believes that it was targeted towards one of the protected classes, they would have the right to file a complaint. The beauty of our system, though, is we do have due process. It will have to go through grievance, and it may get washed there if the scenario, in fact, is an innocent, but is it innocent? And then there will be the hearing, and then the panel will decide based on the specifics. The individual certainly is going to have a right to present their defense.
Okay, thank you so much.
We've got a couple of comments that are running along the same thread, and I actually got texted one too, and that is, it's the court of public opinion, which is going to be out there no matter what. And that is, I recently read an article on a football team, and they immediately cut a contract with someone because somebody said something. And that will exist. That option is still going to exist. The question in the chat was, you said we can't get in trouble for liking a post, but I've seen celebrities nailed for it. Are there things that you might do that you're still going to get, you know, kind of zinged on in this court of public opinion? Yes. And we know that the world is a volatile place today. Again, if you're posting political things, is it going to be a code of ethics violation? No. But are people going to maybe unfriend you on Facebook and you're going to lose business because of it? Yes. You know, that's a very real piece of this. You do need a digital twin, if you will, someone out there who's going to be helpful and happy and positive and not be the negative person out there in the world. And so, you know, and then there's the comment of there aren't any jokes anymore. So definitely taking a stance, taking an opinion, being divisive on an issue could continue. Is it going to be in relationship to this? Maybe not. But the other question that comes up, which is a very valid point to make, is someone says that they know that there's people signed into their Facebook page just to see what they're doing and to keep track of them. And that is going to be, you know, a real case here. What we don't have a real clear answer on is when does private become public? Like, what's the threshold? Is it I said it in my group of 5? Is it I said it in my group of 10? Is my private Facebook page of 100, is that still private? That I don't know that anybody has the answer to that just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this, you need to know your audience too on that. I know there are certain people, if I tell them a secret, it is public knowledge. So I'm not saying that you should say things that aren't right secretively, but the cancel culture that Elizabeth brought up in her presentation is real. And everything is out there, your language, your statements, and I think you need to be real careful about what you're saying and how you're doing it. And certainly your comment on political posts is a good one. I think we've talked inside our brokerage on, your Facebook page and what you say and your statements are part of your billboard. It's part of your marketing. People associate that with you. It's coming from you. So you just need to be very careful in what you're doing.
I got another question on the chat on what is the suggested grievance committee makeup? So who are the people who make up these committees?
So one of the things I can share is the fact that the local associations, they're the ones that decide the makeup of how the grievance committees are put together, how many people. So it's handled at a local level. So there's no absolute guideline. I know that a lot of times in the larger associations, they'll have a larger grievance committee. I know it also, there's times where there's term limits. And so there's people that'll be on for 3 years and then they have to be reappointed. Everybody, and this is just from my local knowledge. And so I'm Elizabeth Pete, and you'll probably be able to add to this, but for any of the members in my local association that serve on the grievance must go through the code of ethics and additional training. And so I can't give you a specific on how the grievance committees are handled. I believe it's at a local level. Elizabeth is putting for Missouri, it's handled at a state level, but there's no unified platform except that they all do need to have the additional training to serve on those committees.
Yeah, for sure. Peter, you guys state, are you guys local or are you state?
I'm going to leave that to the guru, Steve Casper. I think we do some training locally, and then the local associations that don't have the ability to train, the state will train them. Steve, is that correct? He said yes.
Yes, he said yes.
I actually knew that answer, Elizabeth. I'm pretty shocked.
Well, we're all learning on different things. So I think as we're seeing our questions wrap up, we're going to turn it back over to Steve, who's going to kind of conclude us out here. And we are very fortunate that we have his knowledge to wrap us up.
Okay, my privilege to present to you. So before I get into Article 34, I want to go into a quick historical perspective of why this is so important of being a realtor. The National Association began in 1908. The first code of ethics was in 1913. And then in 1924, the code of ethics was expanded to 35 articles. The 34th is before you. I'm going to read it because of its content. A realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individuals whose presence will clearly be detrimental to the property values in that neighborhood. Can you imagine? That was our code of ethics. So you say, well, it was 1924, that was a long time ago. This remained in place for 50 years to 1974. Okay, I'm old. I started in the business in 71. What this meant, I happen to be Jewish, that I couldn't sell myself a house into certain neighborhoods because it would be unethical. Kind of shocking. So fast forward to this summer, the summer from hell. You've already heard several examples of hate speech. I can assure you there were far worse. But we spent all summer discussing, debating whether this should be a change 10-5. Believe it or not, there were many on our committee that were not willing to step away from changing and opening up the area to all speech rather than just real estate related. Fortunately, there were some of us on the committee that believe strongly, and we asked General Counsel, would it be defensible? And the obvious answer is they said yes. So as it turns out, the day before our last meeting, there was an incident here in Cincinnati. A baseball game between the Cincinnati Reds and the Kansas City team. 5th inning. Our announcer, Tom Brenneman, who is the son of Marty Brenneman, 46 years, the announcer for the Reds, Hall of Famer. Many believe that Tom, in fact, was better than his father until the 5th inning. He got caught on a hot mic between the top and the bottom of the innings, and he was caught saying that Kansas City was the fag capital of the world. I suspect many of the people didn't even know that term. It's an old slur, a heinous slur. He was taken off the air immediately. He didn't get to finish. Subsequently, and quickly, he was fired for his comments. Had he been a realtor, there would have at least been due process. Not sure how defensible it would have been, but he would have had his time. It's important to remember that 10.5 makes this a very focused responsibility. It must be targeted against the protected classes. So what's happened to Tom since this all happened? Interestingly, leaders from the LGBTQ community reached out to him and offered to talk and to help him understand why what he said was so bad. I am hoping that that is going to be an option under our code of ethics as to one of the sanctions. Yes, it would be simple to fine, but we're looking for behavioral change. That is the most important portion of this. We have shared through this how important change is. There is a societal change, and we as realtors must be as important to the change as others.
And not doing a very good job of it.
So let me finish with, there was an old adage, when you see something, say something. Let's expand it to when we hear something, say something. Be proud of who we are and be proud of who you chose to affiliate. We are 3 awesome companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that and everything that you've done on the committee. Christine, you've got another comment that kind of came from Anne, and I know she's on here, and then Pete, you can sign us off.
Thank you so much. So Anne DeFries, who was one of our 2020 liaisons, a liaison to the association, brought up something that, I mean, I'm so happy. Thank you, Anne, for bringing this up. NAR has put together an innovative kind of a simulation training called Fairhaven. And so a lot of us, you know, we may have like things that we think or do without even knowing it. And so this is a great simulation. It's free to every realtor to go through this. And it basically, it's a new interactive training platform designed to help combat discrimination, and it's available at no cost. And so that's one thing that I have on my to-do list that I'm going to take. And I urge every single one of you to take that, because it will bring out anything that maybe you didn't even know that you kind of just thought, and it'll bring up things and help you with this. So thank you, Ann, for bringing that up, and for everybody on the call. I think that would be a great thing for us to do and put on our to-do list to get done as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll say with the Fairhaven, the implicit bias and just being able to be better. I heard a great quote the other day. It said, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are." And I think Fairhaven can really help us be better. And, I'm looking at 4 brokers, Larry, Christine, Elizabeth, and a lot of agents and partners here that we have, and we choose to work with one another because we want to be the best of the best. And I'm super glad to be a part of this today, and it's so glad to see all your faces. And I'm glad to get better. And I think that everyone on this call jumped on the call to make sure that we are being better. And just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And hopefully we'll do this again with another topic, but have a safe weekend, stay healthy, and we'll see you hopefully very soon.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.